The clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2025, and the world had no idea what was coming. This wasn't going to be an ordinary year. This was going to be a year that would make even the most skeptical person pause and wonder if something larger was unfolding. If you've been paying attention to the news, you've seen the chaos. Wars erupting, cities burning, natural disasters of unprecedented scale. But what if I told you that all of this, every single event, was written down thousands of years ago? What if the blueprint for 2025 was sitting in an ancient book that most people have never fully read? Today, we're going to walk through the most significant events of 2025, and you'll see with your own eyes how they align with biblical prophecy. Not theories, not speculation, just facts compared with Scripture. And by the end, you'll understand why 2026 might be even more critical. Let's begin. February 14th, 2025. While most people were celebrating Valentine's Day, something far more significant was happening on the other side of the world. The war between Russia and Ukraine entered its fourth year, and the violence reached a new peak. On this single day, Russia launched one of its largest drone and missile attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. Over 90 drones and multiple ballistic missiles targeted power stations across Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Lviv. Millions of people woke up without electricity in sub-zero temperatures. Hospitals ran on emergency generators. Children huddled in bomb shelters that had become their second homes. The United Nations confirmed that by mid-2025, over 60,000 Ukrainian civilians had been killed since the invasion began. But here's what makes this prophetically significant. It's not just that war is happening. Wars have always happened throughout human history. What matters is the scale, the frequency, and the global interconnectedness. 2,000 years ago, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, and his disciples asked him a direct question. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? His answer was specific. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Notice he didn't say there would be one war. He said wars, plural, happening simultaneously across different regions. Now look at 2025, Russia and Ukraine in Eastern Europe. Israel facing multiple fronts in the Middle East. Sudan's civil war in Africa creating the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. Myanmar's military junta brutalizing civilians in Southeast Asia. Armed conflicts in Yemen, Ethiopia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Every inhabited continent except Antarctica has active warfare happening right now. This isn't coincidence. This is the pattern Jesus described. But war is only part of the picture. Jesus continued his prophecy with another warning. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Let's talk about what happened in Sudan because most media outlets barely covered it, but it's one of the most horrific situations unfolding right now. Sudan's civil war between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces has created what the UN officially calls the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world. The numbers are staggering, and they're all verified. Over 150,000 people have died. Not from bullets alone, but from starvation, disease, and the complete collapse of medical infrastructure. More than 10 million people have been displaced from their homes. That's roughly the entire population of Portugal wandering as refugees. But here's the detail that should make your blood run cold. In Khartoum, the capital city, the price of wheat has increased by over 300%. A single loaf of bread now costs the equivalent of an entire day's wages for the average worker. Think about that. Work all day, and you can afford one loaf of bread. Nothing else. Just bread. Now listen carefully to what the Apostle John wrote in Revelation chapter 6 when he described his vision of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. When the third seal was opened, John saw a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. Then John heard a voice saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages." The black horse represents famine. The scales represent rationing and economic collapse. And the price mentioned, a day's wages for basic food, is exactly what we're witnessing in Sudan right now in 2025. This isn't interpretation. This is direct correlation. When prophecy describes a day's wage buying only a day's food, and we see that exact scenario playing out with verified economic data, we need to pay attention. Now let's shift to natural disasters because 2025 delivered some of the most destructive events in recorded history. January 7th, Los Angeles, California. It started as a normal winter day. But by noon, the city was burning. The Palisades Fire and Eaton Fire, fueled by Santa Ana winds gusting over 100 miles per hour, exploded across Los Angeles County with a speed that shocked even veteran firefighters. Within 48 hours, over 40,000 acres were engulfed. The fires moved so fast that people in Pacific Palisades had less than 10 minutes to evacuate. Many didn't make it out with anything except the clothes on their backs. Cars were abandoned on the Pacific Coast Highway as walls of flames jumped across the road. By the time the fires were contained weeks later, the damage was apocalyptic in scale. More than 12,000 structures completely destroyed. Entire neighborhoods reduced to ash and twisted metal. Over 24 confirmed deaths and dozens still missing. The economic impact exceeded $250 billion, making it the costliest natural disaster in American history. Insurance companies called it a black swan event. But was it really unexpected? Revelation chapter 8 describes what happens when the first angel sounds his trumpet. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now, I'm not saying the Los Angeles fires were the literal fulfillment of this prophecy, but look at the imagery. Fire from the sky, massive burning, destruction of vegetation and structures. The parallel is impossible to ignore. And here's something else. During the fires, witnesses described the sky turning blood red from the smoke and flames. Ash fell like snow for days, covering everything in a gray blanket. It looked like the end of the world. March 21st, 2025. The other side of the world. Cyclone Alfred made landfall on Australia's eastern coast as a Category 4 storm. But Alfred wasn't just a hurricane. It was a water apocalypse. The cyclone brought a storm surge over 4 meters high, nearly 13 feet, that inundated coastal towns. Then came the rain. In some areas, over 800 millimeters, that's more than 31 inches, fell in just 48 hours. Rivers that normally flowed gently turned into raging torrents. The Hawkesbury River north of Sydney rose to levels not seen in 50 years. Towns like Windsor and Leesmore were completely submerged. Aerial footage showed nothing but water for miles. Homes, schools, businesses, all underwater. The Australian government declared a national emergency. Over 400,000 people were evacuated. Agricultural losses alone exceeded $3 billion. But here's what really shook people. In Cairns, in far north Queensland, the flooding was so severe that saltwater crocodiles were spotted swimming through residential streets. Apex predators, normally confined to rivers and estuaries, were now hunting in suburban neighborhoods. The natural order had been completely disrupted. Jesus prophesied about exactly this kind of event. In Luke chapter 21, he described the signs that would precede his return. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Focus on that phrase. The roaring and tossing of the sea. Survivors of Cyclone Alfred used that exact word. They said the ocean roared like a living beast as it devoured the coastline. And notice the second part. Nations will be in anguish and perplexity. Australia is a wealthy, technologically advanced nation. They have sophisticated early warning systems and well-funded emergency services. And yet they were overwhelmed, perplexed, unable to fully cope with the scale of destruction. That's the key. It's not just that disasters happen. It's that even the most prepared nations are finding themselves helpless in the face of nature's fury. Now we need to talk about Israel because biblically everything revolves around this tiny piece of land. The prophet Zechariah, writing 2,500 years ago, made a specific prediction about Jerusalem in the last days. This is what the Lord says. I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. Let's break this down. Zechariah said Jerusalem would become a cup that makes nations reel, meaning it would cause confusion, conflict, and instability for the whole world. He said all nations would gather against her, not some nations. All nations. Now fast forward to 2025, after the October 7, 2023 attacks by Hamas that killed over 1,200 Israelis, Israel launched extensive military operations in Gaza. The conflict expanded to include Hezbollah in Lebanon firing rockets from the north, the Houthi rebels in Yemen launching drones and missiles from the south, Iranian proxies operating in Syria. Israel found itself literally surrounded by hostile forces on multiple fronts simultaneously. By mid-2025, the death toll in Gaza exceeded 40,000, according to health authorities there. The humanitarian situation became catastrophic, and the world's response? Unprecedented division. Massive protests erupted in London, Paris, New York, Sydney, and dozens of other major cities. The United Nations passed multiple resolutions condemning Israel's military actions. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants. Countries recalled ambassadors. Economic sanctions were proposed. Political leaders from every continent weighed in. Whether you believe Israel's actions are justified or condemnable isn't the point right now. The point is this. A nation roughly the size of New Jersey, with a population of 9 million people, has become the single most controversial, most debated, most scrutinized country on the entire planet. Every nation has an opinion about Israel. Every international body discusses Israel. The news cycle is dominated by Israel. Zechariah's prophecy said, Jerusalem would be an immovable rock that injures anyone who tries to move it. And what have we seen? Every nation that tries to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict ends up frustrated, injured politically, unable to move the situation in any direction. The Oslo Accords failed. The Camp David summit failed. The roadmap for peace failed. Decade after decade, the rock doesn't move. And everyone who touches it gets hurt. There's another prophecy about Damascus, Syria that many scholars believe is still awaiting fulfillment. Isaiah chapter 17 begins with these startling words. A prophecy against Damascus. See, Damascus will no longer be a city but will become a heap of ruins. Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. For over 11,000 years, through empires and earthquakes and wars, Damascus has stood. But Isaiah says there's coming a day when it will cease to be a city. In 2025, Syria remained fragmented after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in late 2024. Multiple factions control different territories. Turkey occupies the north. Kurdish forces hold the northeast. Various rebel groups and militias fight for control of other regions. Violence continued to flare. In July 2025, clashes between Druze militias and Bedouin groups left over 200 dead in just days. Israel, concerned about instability on its northern border and the presence of Iranian-backed militias, conducted multiple airstrikes on targets inside Syria, including areas near Damascus. Government buildings were hit. Military installations destroyed. Now Damascus hasn't been completely destroyed yet. Isaiah's prophecy hasn't been fully fulfilled. But for the first time in its 11,000-year history, you can see a realistic pathway to how it could happen. The city is caught between internal chaos and external military strikes. Infrastructure is crumbling. The government barely functions. Isaiah's ancient prophecy suddenly doesn't seem so impossible anymore. Let's talk about something that doesn't make headlines but should terrify us. The death of empathy. The Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy about the character of people in the last days. But mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. That word translated, without love in Greek is astorgos, which literally means without natural affection. It describes the loss of basic human compassion, the kind of empathy that makes us protect children and care for the suffering. In 2025, we've seen this erosion happen in real time, documented on camera. Myanmar's military junta, which seized power in 2021, continued its brutal campaign against civilians. The UN Human Rights Office documented over 5,600 civilians killed by security forces since the coup. But it's not just the numbers. It's the nature of the violence, airstrikes on schools, soldiers burning villages and filming it, torture centers where electric shocks are used on prisoners, Buddhist temples desecrated and turned into military bases. And perhaps most disturbing, videos emerged showing soldiers laughing while shooting unarmed civilians in marketplaces. They were entertained by murder. This isn't combat. This is sadism. When human beings can torture and kill while laughing, when children are targeted and no one blinks, we're witnessing exactly what Paul described. The complete absence of natural affection. Burma isn't unique. Similar atrocities have been documented in Sudan, in parts of Ethiopia, in areas of the Democratic Republic of Congo. What's changed isn't that evil exists. Evil has always existed. What's changed is the brazenness, the public nature, the complete shamelessness of it. In previous generations, even brutal regimes tried to hide their atrocities. Now they film them and post them online. Here's where everything connects. Jesus didn't describe these signs as random events. He used a very specific metaphor. All these are the beginning of birth pains. If you've ever witnessed a woman in labor or experienced it yourself, you know how birth pains work. They start slowly, spaced far apart. Then they increase in frequency. The time between contractions gets shorter. And they increase in intensity. Each one is stronger than the last. Until finally, the birth happens. Jesus is telling us that the signs he described, wars, famines, earthquakes, persecution, deception, they would follow this same pattern. Throughout history, we've had wars. We've had natural disasters. We've had periods of moral decline. But what we're seeing now is different. It's the frequency and intensity. Wars used to be regional conflicts that took years to develop. Now we have multiple major conflicts happening simultaneously across different continents, all interconnected through alliances and proxy relationships. Natural disasters used to be occasional tragedies. Now we're breaking records every single year. The costliest fire in American history in January. Historic flooding in Australia in March. Heat waves in Europe and Asia breaking all-time temperature records. It's not that these things are new. It's that they're accelerating. The contractions are getting closer together and stronger. So what does this mean for 2026? If 2025 was a year of intensifying signs, what should we expect in the year ahead? Based on current trajectories, several scenarios seem increasingly likely. First, the conflict in the Middle East will not de-escalate. Israel's security concerns haven't been resolved. Iran continues to develop its nuclear program. Hezbollah has rebuilt its weapons stockpiles. The underlying tensions haven't gone away. They've been temporarily paused. History shows us that pauses like this don't lead to peace. They lead to preparation for the next round. Second, the Russia-Ukraine war shows no signs of ending. Despite talk of negotiations and peace proposals, neither side has achieved its objectives, and neither side is willing to accept the current status quo as permanent. This means the conflict will either escalate or freeze into a long-term stalemate like the Korean Peninsula. Either scenario keeps Europe on edge and drains global resources. Third, natural disasters will likely continue to break records. Climate patterns are shifting in ways that make extreme weather events more frequent and more severe. Whether you attribute this to human activity, natural cycles, or divine judgment, the result is the same. More fires, more storms, more droughts. Infrastructure that was built for the climate of the past won't be adequate for the climate of the future. And fourth, perhaps most significantly, we should expect the technological tools of control to advance rapidly. In 2025, digital currencies took major steps forward. Facial recognition systems became more widespread. Biometric identification expanded. Artificial intelligence reached new levels of capability. None of these technologies are inherently evil. But Revelation chapter 13 describes a future system where economic control is total. It forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. For the first time in human history, the technology exists to implement such a system. Digital currencies allow governments to track and control every transaction. Biometric identification allows authorities to know exactly where everyone is at all times. AI systems can process this information and identify patterns or behaviors instantly. The infrastructure for a total surveillance and control system is being built right now, not in some distant future. Right now. In 2025 and 2026. But here's what I want you to understand. If you've watched this far, if you've seen how current events align with ancient prophecy, you have a choice to make. The signs aren't meant to create fear. They're meant to create urgency. Jesus told his disciples these things not to terrify them, but to prepare them. When these things begin to take place, Stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. The word redemption means rescue, liberation, salvation. For those who have placed their faith in Christ, these signs aren't warnings of doom. They're reminders that history is moving toward its intended conclusion. God is still in control. The chaos isn't random. It's purposeful. But for those who haven't made that decision, who haven't considered what they believe about Jesus and his claims, the urgency is real. The Apostle Paul wrote, "I tell you, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now, because if the signs are accelerating, if the birth pains are increasing in frequency and intensity, then the birth itself is approaching. And when that moment comes, your opportunity to choose will be over." 2025 has shown us that the Bible isn't mythology. It's not ancient superstition. It's an accurate description of human history written in advance. Wars exactly where prophesied. Natural disasters matching the predicted pattern. Israel at the center of global controversy precisely as foretold. Empathy dying just as Paul warned. Technology enabling control systems that Revelation described. Every piece is falling into place. The question isn't whether prophecy is being fulfilled. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is what you're going to do with that information. The clock is ticking. The signs are flashing. The birth pains are intensifying. And 2026 is just days away.